Vibhavari Shesha Haloka Provesha Nidrachari Yuta Jiva Vibhavari Shesha Haloka Provesha Nidrachari Yuta Jiva Bolo Hari Hari Mukunda Murari Rama Krishna Hayagriva Narasimha Vamana Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Brajendana Shama Putana Gatana Kaita Bashatana Jaya Dasarati Rama Yashoda Dulala Govinda Gopala Vrindavana Purandhara Gopi Priya Jana Radhika Ramana Bhuvana Sundara Bhora Ravana Takara Makana Taskara Gopi Jana Vastrahari Brajera Rakala Gopa Vrindapalo Chittahari Vamsidhari Yogindra Bandhana Srinandanandana Brajajana Bhayahari Navina Nirada Rupa Manohara Mohana Bhamsi Bihari Yashodanandana Kamsanishudana Nikunjara Savilasi Kadambakanana Rasaparayana Vrindavipina Nivasi Anandavardhana Premaniketana Pulasharayo Jakakana Gopangana Gana Chitta Vinodhana Samasta Guna Gana Dhamma Yamuna Jivana Kili Parayana Manasa Chandra Chakora Namashudaras Ko Krishnayash Rako Vachanamana Mohora Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabala Girid Baradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Premanande. Chapter 7. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Prabhupada Lilamrta. This is Volume 2, Prabhupada Lilamrta, chapter, well, this is chapter 18, and this book is chapter 7. The top chapter is entitled Breaking Ground. Swami Bhaktivedanta came to US and went swiftly to the archetype spiritual neighborhood, the New York Lower East Side. and installed into an ancient, perfectly presented, perfectly preserved of India. He adopted a storefront as the ashram and started and adored Krishna therein. And by patience and good humor, singing, chanting, and expanding Sanskrit terminology day by day, established Krishna consciousness and the psychedelic manifested center of America East. To choose to attend to the Lower East Side, where kindness and humility and intelligence. This is Allen Ginsberg from his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada's new neighborhood was not as run down as the nearby Bowery, though it certainly was less than quaint. Right across from his storefront, a row of tombstones looked out from the somber, dimly lit display windows of Whitener Brothers and Papper Memorial north of Webster Brothers was Sam Luzetta's. Next to Sam stood an ancient 4-story building named AIR. Then Ben J. Hormiz's monuments, which were more gravestones. And finally, Schwartz's funeral house. On the next block, at number 43, a worn canvas awning jutted out onto the sidewalk. Provenaro Lanza Funeral Home. Then there was Cosmos Parcels, importers. And a few blocks further uptown, the prominent black and white signboard of the Village East Theatre. Up a block, but on the same side of the avenue as the storefront, was the Church of the Nativity, an old 3-story building with new blue paint and a gold-colored cross on top. The 6-story 26 Second Avenue, its face covered by a greenish fire escape, crouched against the massive 9-story Knickerbocker fireproof warehouse. Second Avenue was a main traffic artery for East Manhattan, and the stoplight at the intersection of Horston and Second pumped a stream of delivery trucks, taxis, and private autos past Prabhupada's door. From early morning until night, there would be cars roaming by, followed by the sound of brakes, the competitive tension of waiting bumper to bumper, the impetuous honking, their gears grinding, engines rumbling and revving, and again the zooming by. The traffic was distractingly heavy. At 26 Second Avenue, there was actually 2 storefronts. Therefore, the one to the north was a coin laundry, and the one to the south had been a gift shop, but was now vacant. Both had narrow entrances, large display windows, and a dull paint. Beneath the matchless gift sign was a window 6 feet square that a few weeks before had displayed matchboxes decorated with photos of movie stars of the theatre and 40s. The sign Matchless Gift was the only remaining memento of the nostalgic gift shop that had recently moved out. Below the shop's window, a pair of iron doors in the sidewalk hid some steps to the cellar and boiler room. The wide sidewalk had been laid down in sections of various shapes and sizes at different times, years past. Certain sections had cracked or caved in, and a fine dust with tiny sparkling shreds of glass had collected in the cracks and depressions. A dull black fire hydrant stood on the curb. Midway between the entrances of the 2 storefronts was the main entrance to number 26. This door opened into a foyer lined with mailboxes and intercoms, and then a locked inner door opened into a hallway leading to the stairs or back to the courtyard. To the left of the gift shop's window was its storefront, a dark wooden frame holding a full-length pane of glass. The door opened into the long, narrow storefront, which was now completely bare. Just inside, to the right of the door, a platform extending beneath the display window was just the proper height for a seat. At the far end of the bare, dingy room, 2 grimy paned windows covered with bars opened into the courtyard. To the left of the left-hand window was a small sink fixed to the outside of a very small toilet closet, whose door faced the front of the store. A door on the store's left wall connected to a hallway that led into the courtyard. The courtyard was paved with concrete geometric sections and encircled with shrub gardens and tall trees. There was a picnic table, a cement bird bath, and a birdhouse, and a bird home on a pole. And near the center of the courtyard were 2 shrub gardens. The courtyard was bordered north and south by high walls, and front and back by the 2 tenements. The porch, the perch of the sky above gave relief. Overlooking the courtyard was the rear window of 26 2nd Avenue, was Prabhupada's 2nd floor apartment, where he would now live, work, and worship. With help from his Bauri friends, he had cleaned and settled into his new home. In the back room, his office, he had placed against the walls a thin cushion with an elephant print cover, and in front of the cushion, his unpainted metal suitcase which served as a desk. He had set his typewriter on the desk and his papers and books on either side. This became his work area. His manuscripts bundled in saffron cloth, his stock of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and his few personal effects he kept in the closet opposite his desk. On the wall above his sitting place, he hung an Indian calendar print of Lord Krishna. Krishna, as a youth, was playing on his flute with a cow close behind him. Lord Krishna was standing on the planet Earth, which curved like the top of a small hill beneath his foot. There were two windows on the east walls, and the dappled morning sunlight filtering in through the fire escape fell across the floor. The next room was bare except for a fancy coffee table, which became Prabhupada's altar. Here he placed a framed picture of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. On the wall he hung an Indian calendar print of four-armed Lord Vishnu and Anantasesha, the celestial snake. And in the Bauri loft he put up a clothesline. Both rooms were freshly painted and the floors were clean, hardwood parquet. The bathroom was clean and serviceable, as was the narrow furnished kitchen. Prabhupada would sometimes stand by the kitchen window, gazing beyond the courtyard wall. He had moved here without any prospects of paying the rent monthly. Without any prospects of paying the next month's rent. Although Mike, Carol, Jensen, Bill, and others had encouraged him to move here, some of them now found it a little inconvenient to visit him regularly. But they all wished him well and hoped new people would come here to help him. They felt that his location was the best yet, and he seemed more comfortable here. At the Paradox, Bill would spread the word of Swamiji's new address. All right, so this is a description of the situation in New York. New York, not a very pleasant city. They call it the Big Apple. Like I call it a rotten apple. It's not a very pleasant place, New York, you know. Anyway, Prabhupada had been living uptown, and he was living in the place where this Dr. Mishra had his yoga studio. There was this one man, Prabhupada had been given the contact, that this one man, Dr. Mishra, Bengali, Brahmin, he had opened a yoga ashram there in New York, and he was teaching yoga. So New York, you know, you've got different regions. It's certainly in Prabhupada's time, 1960s, that region of New York, the uptown, high class, rich people, you know? And you had people like Krishnamurti living there, and Krishnamurti was living comfortably with all kinds of French furniture and rich ladies all coming to visit him. And Prabhupada was living there, and he was trying to begin his preaching. But Dr. Mishra, he was a Mayavadi. And sometimes Prabhupada would sing bhajans, and then when he was, after singing bhajan, Prabhupada would then explain the song, and you start preaching. And Dr. Mishra, he didn't like that. He didn't like Prabhupada preaching because he could understand that he was going to lose people if Prabhupada's preaching would, if Prabhupada was given that opportunity to preach, it may result in him losing some of his followers. So Prabhupada didn't have a lot of opportunity for preaching there. But somebody told him, he'd been told that if you go down to the other end of New York, what is called the Lower East Side, he said at that place in the 1960s, there was a cultural revolution taking place. There were young people and they were revolting against the social structure which was there in the US at that time. Particularly, of course, America was at war with Vietnam, and that meant they were recruiting all the young men to go to Vietnam. And a lot of people didn't want to go, not very pleasant place to go and fight, go in the jungles of Vietnam and fight the Viet Cong. Many people died there in Vietnam. Many people were maimed, many died. A lot of lives were lost. The Vietnam War. Vietnam was divided. The northern part of Vietnam wanted to be communist. And the Americans, they had a base in the southern part of Vietnam. And they were trying to keep the base there. They didn't want Vietnam becoming communist. So they fought, and they fought against the communists. But eventually the Americans gave up, and they pulled out of Vietnam. And when they pulled out of Vietnam, then the whole of Vietnam became communist. And that's how it is today. It's still communist. And they changed the name of that city in the south. It became Ho Chi Minh. Before, what was the name? Huh? Saigon. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, Saigon, yeah. So they changed the name to Ho Chi Minh. So it's a communist country. And communists, they don't like religion, you see. They teach Marxism. And Karl Marx said religion is the opium of the people. So they don't encourage people to be religious. Anyway, American people, young American people, most of them didn't want to go to Vietnam. There were young people, it was the 60s, and people were growing their hair long, and there was a thing called flower power, and the people were becoming what they called hippies at that time. And they were taking an interest in Eastern culture. They were becoming more interested in spirituality. They were looking at alternatives to the materialistic lifestyle, which was prominent in America. You go to America, it's a very materialistic environment. And people only think about money, and make money, and get money, and if you've got money, you've got position, you've got status. So young people, they were not too much, the thought of it all was not very attractive. And they were looking for alternatives. And many people had gone to live in this region of New York called the Lower East Side. And people were living there and, playing their guitars and singing songs. And, they would sing songs like, "Give peace a chance," you know, "Give peace a chance." Because there was war, you know, America's supposed to go to war, and all the young American people, they all have to join the army and go there to Vietnam. No, people didn't want to do it. And they would run away from home, because if they stayed at home, they'll come and get you and take you to the army by force. And many people ran away and they came to live like in New York, just away from everyone, away from their home. But the police will come and they'll check everyone, and they'll check and see, are you supposed to go to the army? Oh yeah, you're supposed to go to the army, and they'll take them. And so young people were trying to avoid this. Actually, one devotee described how he did it. He managed to get off from going to the army by proving himself to be crazy. So what he did, he put a big Jagannath around his neck. He had a big Jagannath, he was wearing it around his neck. And before, you know, you have to go and they interview you, and they would interview the people. You know, you have to go to the army. They want to make sure you're not completely crazy. So he came, you know, he went for the interview, a big Jagannath around his neck. And so they asked him, "What is that around your neck? What is that you're wearing?" He said, "That's God." So they said, okay. You don't need to go to army. Yeah. We don't need crazy people to go there. So that was how one devotee got off. Different ways they try. But many people did go. And of course it wasn't very pleasant. So Prabhupada was living there in New York at that time. The young people were living there in the Lower East Side. There was a region that was called Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village. And there was many young people there. Many people in the streets playing their guitars and singing and begging like that. And so Prabhupada, he moved to this area of New York. But it wasn't only hippies. There were a lot of other people as well. There were people who were what we would call vagrants. Vagrants means homeless people with no income, with no means of livelihood. Then they were just living in the street. And there were people also who were alcoholics. We would call them winos. They live on wine, you know, if they get any money, they'll buy alcohol with it. And I remember in New York, what happens, a car comes along the road and it stops at the red light, and then this man comes up, and he has a cloth, and he takes his cloth and he starts cleaning the car. You see? He starts cleaning the car. Then he comes to the driver of the car and he asks him to give some money. You see? And so this is how people were living. This was New York at this time, this region of New York. It wasn't a very nice area. And Prabhupada is living there. And of course, young people in those days, they're taking a lot of drugs. And they're a lot of crazy people. A lot of drugs, a lot of crime. Crime is very prominent there. It's not safe to go out at night. You cannot walk in the street at night. There's a big park there in New York called Central Park. And anybody who goes there at night, they'll get murdered or they'll get seriously injured. They'll get attacked and robbed, and beaten up. So you have to be crazy to go into that park at night because it's so dangerous. And this is New York. You know, it's not a pleasant place. And Prabhupada's coming there, 70 years old, doesn't know anybody, he doesn't have any income, and he's living there. And he is trying to teach Krishna consciousness. So he had come with a few boxes of Bhagavatam. He had printed the first canto Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in India. Maybe you have seen copies of that. When I joined the movement, that was the only Bhagavatam we had. The first canto in 3 volumes, printed in India. And it was not very good printing. And there were a lot of mistakes and everything in it. But Prabhupada had it. He'd brought it to America with him, and some copies also came to the UK. So Prabhupada had some boxes there. Whenever he gave a lecture, he would bring the books and show them and tell people that these books are for sale. So Prabhupada was distributing books long before us. And he would also try to get people to help him. Previously, before he went to America, he had Back to Godhead magazine. Well, it wasn't a magazine. Actually, initially it was just one sheet of paper, and he had some articles printed on both sides. So that was the Back to Godhead in India when Prabhupada did, 1944. But then people told him, why are you printing magazines and pieces of paper like this? These pieces of paper, they'll get lost. They said, why don't you print a book? Why don't you write a book? So Prabhupada thought this is a good advice. So he began to print the Bhagavatam. And he managed to get money from different people. And he printed the first canto, first volume. Then he got some money from somebody else to print the second volume. And at one point he also got money from the lady who gave him the passage on the ship to go to America, Srimati Morariji, a rich Gujarati lady who had a shipping company. So she was a devotee of Lord Krishna. She was from the, she was a follower of Lord, worshipper of Nathji, Srinathji. So that's Pushti Marg, follow Balabhacharya. So they're Vaishnava, and Prabhupada got money from her. She donated so that he could print a volume of the Bhagavatam. So when he went to America, he brought as many copies as he could with him to America to distribute there. And that was some income he was getting, but very difficult for him to get any income. And he's living there in New York. He came to the Lower East Side. Somehow he got some money from, or he got the shop. He got that shop, that 26 Second Avenue. The devotees purchased that shop now. If you go to New York, you can visit that place and you can see 26 Second Avenue. They have a program once a week there. You know, it's a small place. It's a tiny little storefront, you know. It's a little store with a window, big window. So Prabhupada was there. That was the first temple. And it describes how there was a sink there as well. There was a toilet in the corner, and outside the toilet there was a sink. So there's a few pastimes about that Prabhupada, he could sit there, he would sit on his Vyasasana, and he would spit, and he could spit right into the basin. Brahmananda describes how he was like, wow, you know. He would sit there on the Vyasasana, you know, go right into the basin. And another time Prabhupada was giving a lecture, and you know, this area very noisy, you know, all the vehicles, a lot of noise, traffic. Satsvarupa Maharaj is describing it. So one evening while Prabhupada was giving a lecture, the door opened and one of these tramps from outside who were just living in the street, he came in and he's carrying a toilet roll. And he goes into the toilet there in the corner of the store and he put the toilet roll in the toilet there. And then after he put it in the toilet, then he came out and went out again. And Prabhupada said, just see, he's beginning his devotional service. So, these kind of things happen. Prabhupada was living there, and sometimes you have to step over these people on the street because they're so drunk, they cannot even stand up. You have to just step over them. So Prabhupada was living in this kind of environment. Quite a change from Vrindavan. You know, Prabhupada had been living in Vrindavan, and in Vrindavan in Prabhupada's time, it was very peaceful, very quiet, and everybody was a devotee. You know, not like Vrindavan today. It's like New York now, you know, with all the traffic and the cars. And it was never like that in Prabhupada's time. So it was really a big change, Prabhupada coming to New York, living in that place. But he accepted all that for the service of Krishna. He accepted this environment. He understood this is what it's going to be like. This is the Western world. It wasn't like Vrindavan. But Prabhupada never forgot Krishna. Even though he was living in New York, he would tell people, I am not living in New York. I am always in Vrindavan because I'm always thinking of Krishna. So this is important. As devotees, we should understand everywhere can be Vrindavan. There's a verse in our Bhagavatam, Narayana parasarve na kutasjanya vibyate swarga apavarga narakesh vapitu yata darshana. Right? One who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, for him there is no difference between heaven and hell and liberation. He sees everywhere the same. So Prabhupada had that vision. He did not see any difference. You know, we go in these places, we'll go, oh, you know, so noisy, so polluted. But Prabhupada was just thinking, this is Krishna's energy. And Prabhupada describes how the neighbors would always complain. He said outside there'd be so much noise, the trucks rumbling up and down and everything, so much traffic. But as soon as there's a little ching, 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 immediately the neighbors are banging. Stop it, why are you making so much noise? So very difficult, you know. You don't get any trouble with neighbors here, do you? Huh? No? Hey, you're lucky, you got a big temple. They cannot complain. But Western world, outside India, you know, it's very difficult. Neighbors are always an obstacle. And even in Prabhupada's time, they would complain. But Prabhupada was trying. He accepted all of these things. And young people were coming, and they were starting to take interest. And Prabhupada was cultivating them, cooking for them, and training them to cook also. So that was very important. prasadam and kirtan. Prabhupada would lead all the kirtans. Prabhupada would play the drum. Of course, they had no madanga, they just had a bongo drum. But Prabhupada could play it very expertly. And people would come and they liked the kirtan. They enjoyed it. It was something very new. So Allen Ginsberg, he was talking about how Prabhupada had come there, how he brought light into the dark, into that dark atmosphere of the Greenwich village, where the people were in so much ignorance. They were so absorbed in sense gratification. So Prabhupada changed their way of life. He taught them a new way of life. Chanting, taking prasadam, and hearing the scriptures, regularly hearing. And Prabhupada would always want to speak, let people hear. Very important. Nowadays you get people come and they like kirtan, and as soon as the class comes up, oh, they have to go. And Sunday program, we know, Sunday program, I was just in Nizamabad, we had a Sunday program there. So when the lecture was going on, the temple was half full, but by the time the lecture finished and it's time for prasadam, temple was full. You know, so many people came. They all know what time is prasadam. So it's a common phenomena in ISKCON. Right? People like prasadam. They're not very eager to hear, but it's important for people to develop a taste for hearing. They have to hear, and Prabhupada liked to speak, he wanted to speak. So we try to follow Srila Prabhupada's example, encouraging people to hear and speaking regularly. And Prabhupada would often get devotees to speak. He liked to hear other devotees speak. He would ask them to speak. So Krishna consciousness is a process, and it's based on hearing and chanting. And from the beginning, it's important people to get an opportunity to hear and chant. We know people are not much inclined to hear. They don't like to hear philosophy. But we try to make it interesting for them. Actually, there's a lot of things there in the philosophy to interest people, if people are just willing to hear. People don't like to hear because their sense gratification may be challenged. Most people live, common people, their whole life is based around sense gratification. They just want to enjoy the body. And we're preaching against that. We're preaching that you have to control the senses. Just like Prabhupada was lecturing one night, it was in San Francisco, this famous group came, they were called the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead, they were very popular in America in Prabhupada's time. So one night they all came for the lecture. They all came for the program. They came to the temple there, and they'd heard Prabhupada was there, and they came to hear Prabhupada. So they had kirtan and everything, and you know, they liked the kirtan. But then Prabhupada began to speak, and Prabhupada began to speak about the importance of controlling the senses and not giving in to lusty desires. And he spoke about the evils of illicit sexual connection. And so of course that did not please these people who were, you know, the rock group. They were the music group. Their whole life was centered around music and sex. You know, just enjoying free sex. And their songs were also talking about these kind of things. Slum Goddess of the East Side and songs like this, you know, just about free love and sex. And so Prabhupada spoke against all of this. Prabhupada did not compromise in presenting Krishna consciousness. He made it very clear that we have a process, we have principles, we have rules. You want to be in this Krishna consciousness moment, you have to follow these principles. It's difficult for some people. Okay, we know, just like there was this one boy, he came, he was a devotee for a little while, but then he came to Prabhupada and he said, Swamiji, I have to go, I can't do this anymore. He said, my father used to be a boxer. He said, I cannot do all this controlling the senses, controlling the mind, I have to go. So Prabhupada said, okay, you go, you know. I'm not stopping you, you're free. You know, the door is open. You don't want to be Krishna conscious, go ahead. Go back into Maya. Go back and be devoured by the material energy. You're not free wherever you go. You think you're not free here. You think you're free when you go out of Krishna consciousness? No, you're not free. You're controlled by the modes of nature. Everyone is controlled. We're controlled by these modes of nature, and these modes of nature are all controlled by time, and time is devouring everyone. So we have to understand the nature of the material world. We can choose Krishna or Maya. If you choose Maya, then you go under the modes of nature. You're conquered by time, you're devoured by time. But if you stay with Krishna, yes, you're controlled by Krishna. But Krishna's very pleasing and very kind and very caring and loving. Maya is not so gentle. So we have to understand the nature of the material world. Krishna consciousness is the positive alternative. People were looking for some alternative. Alternative was there, Krishna conscious. But you have to pay the price, right? You have to pay, and just like that verse is it, Krishna Bhakti Rasabhavati Kriyadam Yatoti Lab Tatra Loyam Atpimuyam Ekalam Janma Koti Sukriterna Labhyate. Right? There's only one price. You have to pay that price to get Krishna consciousness. What is that price? Of course, that price was loyam, greediness, that eagerness to achieve something. That is the price you have to pay to get Krishna consciousness. We have to have that intense desire that we want something very badly, and we're ready to pay that price to get it. And you know, why should we hold on to things like meat, fish and eggs and alcohol and drugs and sex when you can get the greatest treasure in Krishna consciousness? That the sinful life of the material world cannot give any real happiness. It can only crush us and give us more and more misery, more and more problems. So we have to be willing to pay that price to get Krishna consciousness. Give up the attempt to enjoy the body. Whatever attempt you make to enjoy the body, it will always fail. You'll never be successful. No one is successful because the nature of the body is temporary, finished in the course of time. So anyway, Prabhupada is bringing this kind of message to the people in New York, to the hippies, to these people in this nasty environment of New York. Prabhupada has come to tell them the nature of material world. Okay, so are there any questions, anybody? Sasvarupa Maharaj writes about New York. He said, the Lower East Side has a history of change and human suffering as old as New York. 300 years before Prabhupada arrived, it had been part of Peter Stuyvesant's estate. Today's landmark of Tompkins Square Park had these today's landmark at Tompkins Square Park had been a salt marsh known as Stuyvesant's Swamp. That's the history of New York. That what is today Tompkins Square Park, and 300 years ago it was a swamp. So things change, you know, just like places, you know, like Hyderabad become a huge city. It's spread out, you know, spread quite far. Now it can't spread any further. It's already spread out a long way. But previously, you know, a few hundred years ago, Hyderabad was not so big. It was a small place. Today it's a big city. So the same way, Tompkins Square Park, where Prabhupada began the kirtan, it had been a swamp. The Lower East Side first became a shrine in the 1840s when thousands of Irish immigrants, driven by the Irish potato famine, came and settled. You see how it was in the 1840s? Means just 200 years ago. People in Ireland, when the potato crop failed, they had nothing to eat because they just lived on potatoes. So they all came to America. So there's a big community of Irish immigrants there in New York. Not so much now, you know, they've spread out, they move to other cities. But that's how New York developed. Then two decades later, the Irish became the image of the American to the next immigrants. The next immigrants, the Germans, who gradually grew in numbers to become the largest immigrant group in New York City. Many Germans came, of course, the Jews. The Jews came out of Germany because they were getting persecuted. And so you have a lot of rich Jews in New York. New York, the Rockefellers, for example, they're the Jews, you see. All the rich people, very rich, powerful business corporations, there are many, usually Jews, who run these things. Even in our Hare Krishna movement, many devotees were Jews. They became devotees. They came from Jewish families. So people were surprised that they came out of the Jewish family and they came to Hare Krishna. There's a change. Then after next came East European Jews, means the Jews from Poland and the Ukraine. And by 1960, or by 1900s, the Lower East Side had become the most densely populated Jewish ghetto in the world. But in the next generation, the ghetto began to break up as Jews moved to the suburbs and economic advancement. New York, America is a very cosmopolitan place, so many different races there. You've got all different communities there. So next, the Puerto Ricans thronged in hundreds and thousands in the 1950s, emigrating from their island poverty or moving in from Harlem. They and the Negroes from Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant, who arrived next, were the next group who, along with the Poles and the Ukrainians, popularized the 2 square miles of tenements and crowded streets that formed the Lower East Side in the 1960s. The Lower East Side slums. Slums means, you know, what Jupar was like that, you know. Very broken down old homes, you know. So they came like that. They came, many immigrants, they came to New America. They had no money, they had nothing. But they came and they worked. And that's America is a whole mixture of so many different races. You've got places like Harlem, which is usually all black. And then you've got places like the Bronx, which will be more Puerto Rican. Different communities, different places. The Irish, the Poles, the Ukrainians, so many different people. Nowadays also we're seeing, you know, because the Russia-Ukraine war, so many Ukrainians have come out and they've come to Europe, and you go in Holland and in Germany and in Switzerland, you will find communities. In England also, you'll see a lot of Ukrainians are there. They've come there, immigrants, you know, refugees because of the war. So this is the way of the world, material world. Here in India, you also get sometimes refugees coming. You get people coming from other countries. People come from Bangladesh sometimes. They come from Pakistan and different places. They will come to India. So New York was like that. Nowadays, of course, they're trying to stop because so many different races, and nowadays also American economy is not so good. So they've kind of closed the doors. They don't let so many immigrants come now. But in Prabhupada's time, it was quite more open. Prabhupada's time, there were very few Indians there. Now there's quite a few Indians there, but in Prabhupada's time, very, very less Indians were there. So Prabhupada was preaching to the Americans, to the Western people. Today, when you go to America, I haven't been for a long time, but when I've heard that nowadays in America, so many Hindu people come. The temples are run by Indian people. They do a lot. They give donations and they help to maintain the temple. So they do a lot of service there. Okay, any question? No questions? Anyway, I'm not encouraging you to go to America. I think after you've read that book, you read about Prabhupada there in New York, you definitely don't want to go to New York. It's not got any better. It's got worse. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go back to Vrinda ki. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we express our thanks to Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti Vighna Vinasa Narasimha Swami Maharaj by one-time chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Thank you, Maharaj, for visiting ISKCON Attapur. Hare Krishna.